Good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to this session on building with beds. My name is Will Kirkpatrick. I'm head of hotels and extended stay at Gerald Eve. We're one of Europe's largest hotel valuation and advisory firms. In March of last year, we were acquired by Newmark, also part of the Cantor Fitzgerald Group as well. So we are very fortunate today to have an amazing panel. So what I'm going to do is we'll do the normal ask the panel to introduce themselves, but I thought that sounded a bit boring. So what I've done, I thought I'd make them work for their money. So what I'm going to ask them to do is to explain who they are, then they're going to say why we should invest in their sector, and then to make it a bit more interesting, we're going to put them on the spot by asking them what the kind of typical yields would be for a London asset, and let's say a regional city like Manchester, and then what the typical build cost per unit would be for their sector, and then it's all about profit, isn't it? So let's see what is the profit as a percentage of total revenue for each of their sectors. So they're going to try their very best to answer those questions. I appreciate they are difficult, so I apologise for being annoying. So they'll do as best they can. And then at the very end of the session, we're going to ask each of the panellists, if I give you £100 million, which of the following panellists would they invest into, if that makes sense? So we'll have a little see what the viewpoints and what sector is leading the way. Also, I'm biased. I believe that hotels and extended stay are the best sector ever, but I'm here to be educated. So would you like to explain who you are and why you should invest in your sector?
I'm Richard Berridge. I used to be the CEO of the UK Single Family Association, which was an organisation that was involved in promoting the investment into houses as opposed to apartments. I now sit on not on the board of the ARL, but as a special advisor of the ARL, focusing on single family housing. And I also have a consultancy business called Blackbird RE, and I'm also a trustee for social housing operator as well. So our business is, the business I'm particularly interested in is the delivery and promotion of institutionally owned rental houses throughout the UK. In terms of why you should invest in it, well, 60% of the PRS are houses, 80% of what we live in every day are houses, and yet investment so far has been really focused on dense and quite dense urban areas, which has the limitations to it as well. And also it's quite risky to build in houses, and it really means that you need to top tier in construction individuals or companies and consultancies to be able to deliver that. So what we can really do, the real reason I'm really interested in houses is because we can build them absolutely anywhere in the country and at any scale. And because we can do that, we can start to sort of enfranchise the whole of the investment and building industry right the way throughout the country to be involved in what we do. So rather than having just a very few investors of a top-tier nature, it means that we can broaden that out enormously. And we can start to involve everybody within the country who's involved in the building industry or in the lettings business, or in the investment business, to be involved in building houses, and that's why I think we should invest in it. Did you want me to go on to the other pricing?
I do. That's
okay. Do you want me to go the pricing? Well, the pricing in terms of building a house anywhere between 1,400 and 3,000, square metre, typically probably around 1,900 pounds a square metre. In terms of yield in Manchester and London, houses typically are not urban constructs, so they tend to be slightly more suburban. So let's talk about the difference between perhaps the northeast or the southeast. Southeast yields are lower, so net yields there would be more 4 to 4.25. North probably 25 bips higher. In terms of EBITDA, we don't really talk about EBITDA in terms of what we do. We tend to do IRRs, anything around the 15%-ish. So is that covered it?
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Good start. Thank you very much. Navneet?
Yeah, my name is Navneet Bali, excuse me, and I've been in the hotel industry for over 40 years, starting with luxury hotels, and then towards the middle budget hotels, and for the last probably 12 years in the hotel hostel hybrid sector. And in my last role now, not my last role, my recent role, which is post-pandemic, I've got a startup where I've created a new brand, which is in the same hotel hostel hybrid sector. So in a sense, dealing with beds, but as you can imagine, with hostels, you have beds which are, with bunk beds as well as what we call shared rooms as well as private rooms. The brand is called Live In, and the first hotel opened in Frankfurt, and we are trying to expand this across Europe with our partner investors into major cities where we think are the younger demographic that we appeal to, go to what we call startup cities like London, of course, Berlin, Lisbon, Paris, Hamburg, Zurich, etc. So major cities where we can attract younger people who come both for leisure and for pleasure, but for connecting with each other and to stay both in shared accommodation as well as the regular hotel rooms. So the idea behind this is that, and why it appeals to investors, I can talk about costs. Costs can vary from city to city, but I would say that typically you're talking about, and I'll do it per bed, if you like, because everything is very much focused on, we're talking about beds, so it's per bed. But I can give you an idea of how many beds per room. So roughly we do about 3.5 beds per room. And typically I would say it's around 5,000 euros per bed, the cost of building something like this. I would say it depends on the city. Paris and London will be more expensive than Leipzig or a secondary market, if you like, in Germany, where we also are planning to be. Mm-hmm. So it will be about that, and it's therefore you're talking of about per room. It's you could be 200,000 a room, if you like, depending on the city. And in terms of yields and in returns, primarily because you're using real estate very efficiently in this model, because you're using, look at it simplistically, you have 3.5 beds per room, but you're also using space vertically rather than just horizontally. So if you're able efficiently to operate it efficiently, therefore with higher occupancies, which you tend to have, because you're not only competing with the budget hotel sector like Premier Inn or Ibis, but you're also competing with hostels. So you have a larger market, if you like, that you address in this model. So you tend to have high occupancies and you can yield them better. Our impression is that you get a higher revenue per square meter and higher EBITDA per square meter than the traditional hotels. And that's one reason why it's good to invest in this business model. And typically against the comp set that we deal with, which is both hostel sector and the budget hotel sector, you'd get for a 15% higher return. Not return, but 15% higher EBITDA per square meter on the average because of this model. The other thing about the model is it's very flexible because you're not rigid in terms of your structure of the room. You can have a 6-bedded room or a 5-bedded room or a regular hotel room. So you can fit this into buildings which need to be converted and don't have very rigid physical requirements. So it lends itself to conversion or adaptability. So half the hotels in the brand that I used to run before, called Meininger, which some of you are familiar with, I think 50% of the development we did were conversions rather than new build. And so that's why it's very adaptable. So that's flexibility that comes in from an investor point of view, better returns. And the third thing, it's also very resilient. And the reason it's resilient is because it's the budget end of the market. And therefore, when there's a slowdown in the economy, as you experience every now and then people tend to shift downwards. And so it's very resilient. It's almost not at the complete bottom end of the chain, but it's at the low end of the value chain, if you like. So therefore, it's very effective when it comes to it's resilient. I think that's the right word. So it's resilience, higher returns, and also there's a lot of opportunity. I think there's a big gap in the market for this product, and demand and supply, if you like. There's not enough brands out there. So I'm in the market for looking for brands to buy, buying hotels. Not brands, but buying hotels, so we can convert them to our model. So if there's anybody out there who needs to sell, we're happy to buy.
So I think it's now time for Jane. So thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Jane Smart. I'm the CEO for Life Care Residences. And we heard from Jamie a little while ago, Inspired Villages, talked about the New Zealand base. I have come over from New Zealand to help grow the industry here in a different type of way. Our business actually is founded by a family who were interested in retirement living going back in the 80s, and Meet Life Care was listed and sold, and Cliff Cook had a passion for coming to England, so he's been investing here since the 90s. So although it's a New Zealand base, we've got a very strong interest in the UK. And our jewel in the crown is Battersea, which is here in London, and we built that. The other two properties we have acquired was Grove Place in Romsey, where King Charles I had his last lunch before he was abdicated. So we've got a fantastic story on a huge estate, but we have a retirement village there and another one down in Summerley, but in Dorchester. But our main key thing is to get the operations tight, because when we're looking at investing and growing, if we don't actually get the retirement living sector working efficiently and effectively through good systems and processes, you don't get the gains that you would normally get. But I think it's very hard to compare what you're doing in the student market and the hotel market compared to what we do, because it's a long-term investment for what we look at. You know, we're looking at an average stay of around 8 years before we see a resale. So Battersea is just over 8 years now, and we're starting to see our first resales coming through. And so when we're looking at investors, and I too am interested in what you as investors would like and why you don't come into our market, is because once we start the resales, which is approximately an 8-year patient capital period, we always have the underlying ownership of the building, and the apartment is leased to the resident for the time that they're there with us. They sell it on, and we get what is called a deferred management fee of 30%. So on every resale, we get 30%. Although I have to be truthful, in Dorchester we get 1.5%, and that is not as attractive. So we're looking at all of those frameworks. But if you're looking at a long-term investment model, that apartment will sell again in 8 years' time, and when that sells, the next one, it will sell, and we have the underlying ownership of the building. We provide the communities, as explained by Jamie. We are competitors, but we're also collaborators, so that we can actually give people over 65 a really good life. So, yeah, I'm not going to cover yields on that at this stage, because it's a little bit different.
Last but certainly not least.
And the good news is I don't have to cover yields on hotels, because Navneet luckily just covered that. And I got to take you back to the way we operate at Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. We are a global hotel franchise company. We don't own a single hotel. We do not lease hotels. So therefore, we do not buy or sell hotels. Obviously, we work with people who own the hotels. We work with other people who operate the hotels. We provide the brand, the infrastructure, and the machine that drives revenue to those hotels. Going back to the question, should you put your money in a hotel? I guess the answer is always, it depends. It really depends what your location is.
That answer's wrong. You should always invest in hotels, sorry.
Actually, no. You should not always invest in hotels, because if you have a rubbish location in a market that nobody's ever going to finish, no, I don't want to talk on people, but somebody wanted to do a 200-unit luxury Wyndham hotel in Lapland year-round, and the nearest airport was 150 kilometers away. That sounds like a really bad idea to me. You know, there are better things that you could do with your money. But overall, as a concept, the reason why you should be investing in hotels is, for one, we price daily. Every single day, doesn't matter what inflation is, doesn't matter what happens, we will price in line with the market. I think, and you can probably correct me on this, we value hotels different than real estate. It goes much more on the operating company than just the bricks and mortar. And at the point where you're selling in the event of a well-run, well-branded hotel, there's definitely a premium. Yeah, people value well-looked after, well-known buildings that make a lot of money. Yeah. On top of that, and this is a personal note, it's a fantastic industry. You know, who doesn't want to work in hotels, really?
I'll come to
You
ours.
don't want to work in hotels?
Wait till the end of the session when he's voting for you, so that's fine. So
Okay.
we look forward to that vote, okay? Look, everybody, thank you very much. That's interesting to hear the actual numbers as well, what's happening in the sector, because that's really paramount, because I appreciate people in this room have got lots of money to invest, and actually where do you put your money today is a question, and obviously hotels is from the unbiased panel here. So Navneet, in terms of planning, what do you see as the kind of major planning constraints in creating hybrid hotels and student housing, co-living?
So the planning, I mean, we are always focused in our model on hotel use, right? So in that sense, it doesn't matter because it's hotel use, because it's a hybrid, but in the end, the product is fungible within the hotel use sector. The challenge is, if you like, when you want to add some other hybrid sector, for example, we talked about it in an earlier session, where there was an issue of whether you can combine PBSA with a hotel. And there's a brand that's done it. And the challenge is, how do you combine the two? Or maybe co-living with hotels. There have been people who tried to combine those two. And then you have an issue with, is it co-living, is it residential or is it hotel?
Yes.
And then you do have that challenge. And also different cities across Europe have different planning rules, if you like. So, for example, the model that I looked at where there was a combination, and we talked about it earlier, the TSH, or what is called the student hotel, now the social hub, TSH, they use the hotel model. And then within that, the PBSA sector, and how do you give a one-year contract when actually the law in Berlin says you can only do 6 months? So I don't know how they get around it. I think I know, but I don't want to talk about it. But there is a something. They've been able to do it somehow by talking to the authorities, getting special, etc. But it's an issue when you're combining the two. And also, I think just not planning, it also comes down to, and I know Joe's an expert on that. We talked about it many times in different panels. How do you do the yields? Yeah. What are the right yields? I mean, hotels have a different risk profile, they have a different yield, whereas the resi side would have a different yield. So then you have to do a blended kind of model.
And from a valuation point, it is quite scary that the yields difference, because Joe's trying to educate me. And it is scary. We're looking at a couple of projects at the minute where it should be a hotel or should be co-living, and actually the yield shift is remarkable actually in terms of the viability. Richard, in terms of your side, is planning a major issue for you, or what's your obstacles in terms of that?
Well, I mean, with us, it's normally, the straightforward sort of residential planning as well, system as far as we're concerned. It's much more around, is it going to be incorporated into the MPPF, and do we get any sort of benefits from it being in that? Or, I was doing something with the BPF the other day about modernising some of the passages in the MPPF to incorporate within that, and also probably with certain things within building regs as well. But that's really around, you're trying to ensure that local authorities, and all local authorities, making sure they've all got a plan to work to, which some of them don't have, and certain numbers to meet. It's trying to ensure that everybody's sort of working off the same page, really. Yeah. That's the problem we find, is that because we're sort of down with localism these days, you find that every local authority is sort of working off a slightly different plan to everybody else. So that's a real problem, for us, because you can be doing one thing in one area which is acceptable or encouraged, and then doing something in a different area which is not acceptable and certainly not encouraged. So it is very difficult. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to get it sort of within the MPPF a passage which encourages what we would term a tri-tenure model, which I think we probably think is coming anyway amongst house builders, and that's really to ensure that whenever any scheme comes forward, that it's focusing on both the three main tenures, and so that's private rent, homes for sale, and social housing. And we haven't seen much of that because house builders' behaviour, generally speaking, has been around. Well, depending on what the economic cycle is at the moment, houses for sale. And that's led us to a rather difficult position where we are at the moment, which is shortage housing. But we have seen, for instance, Berkeley Homes, for instance, who have just announced the fact that they are going to be investing in themselves 4,000 build-to-rent homes, although it will be flats. But it is the beginning of seeing house builders start to think about what they're delivering and where and what the tenures are. And what we're trying to achieve through the planning model is to smooth out the bumps in the road, depending on economic cycles, so that house builders are delivering a smooth number of houses consistently throughout every economic cycle. And that means that if it's focused on those three tenures, irrespective of the economic cycle, they can achieve that.
Okay, fantastic. And then, Jane, from your business perspective, what are the issues with planning constraints around retirement senior living applications, which also include nursing home offerings and a continuum of care?
We have a lot of problems, and similar to what you're saying, and everybody has different thinking. We haven't got a collaborative way of thinking, but what we've got to remember is that if we can build a retirement senior living village, we will be able to house, 150, 200 people, which is releasing housing to, often these people are in 2, 3 bedroomed houses, they're on their own. That then can be released into the market for anybody else that wants to have normal residential living and development. So I think there's got to be a better strategic thinking on what all the different components of buildings with beds has and what it can offer the community, because we're short of housing, but as we can all work together to achieve it. But it is very, very difficult because we get such different thinking, and also with changes of personnel in the council or even in councillors will change the way they want to have things happen.
It's surprising because you'd thought your sector is not going to have late night parties and doing donuts in car parks and so on. The local are quite happy to have you there.
Yeah, we try and tell them that. We really do. And we actually limit it. We tell them we've got your buses and we'll use them.
Yep.
But what's really interesting is the community around the property is that often we've had one application turned down a little while ago now, and it was quite devastating because we had put a lot of work in, and it was part of the residential community around the building that didn't want it. So they had quite a large say as to what would happen. So I know what we would do next time, which is we are planning on something else to do there, but it's actually communicating with them first.
Okay. And then Ronald, so in terms of hotels, well, just before we go on to hotels and extended stay, can I just say it's great to see that some of the brands are now starting to look at extended stay. For me personally, I think, there's a couple of hotel companies look at it, but the brands really have been asleep at the wheel when it comes to the extended stay sector. And so it's great to see that now the brands are now starting to look at that more seriously, which is long overdue in my viewpoint. So thank you for that, but I'll move swiftly on to the question I should be answering. So how do hotel companies adjust to guest performances for more flexible living arrangements, either in terms of space or in time?
Okay, so there's two issues, right? First of all, you have a length of stay issue. So let's say you need to be somewhere for 2 to 3 weeks. You have different things that you want to do in your accommodation while you're there than if you're there for 1 or 2 days. 1 or 2 days is usually fine. Any old room, as long as it's clean, it's got a good bed, it's got a clean shower, and I can have a breakfast, that will do. If you get to a longer length of stay, there are different needs that you want to have. Yeah, you want to have more space. You need to look at 2 different elements. What does your guest want? As in, why are they staying? What do they need while they're here? What services do we need to provide? And what works from an investment perspective, right? And one of the reasons why, in your view, it has taken hotel companies quite a long time to get to launching these brands is we need to make sure both of these elements work, right? Because we have 2 sets of customers. We have the guests that come and stay with us, but we have the owners that come to us to get the franchise agreements, right? So to give you a practical example, we launched a brand called Echo Suites about 18 months ago in the US. It's currently only available in the US. It was developed at the request of our owners because they came to us and said, listen, we have all these brands that we can use within your portfolio, but I'm being approached for people that are coming on contract work, which happens a lot in the US, for months at a time, and we don't have suitable accommodation. And the accommodation that is available at a price point is too high for what we want to achieve. So we need to make sure this works from an investment perspective. I'll make this short. We sat down with it, we came up with a model, we costed everything from land acquisition to build cost, to the cost of the fit out, to the lampshades, got suppliers for everything, made a total package, ran it past the investors. In short, we're now on a pipeline of 270 properties in 18 months. And that works because investors believe in the product because they developed it with us. We have done the market research to ensure that there is the customer base that actually wants to stay in this product. And now we're comfortable to roll this out. On the other hand, that doesn't work everywhere. I cannot build to the same sort of scale in the UK as we could do in the US. I cannot build at the same cost, and I cannot operate at the same cost. And, you know, land's very expensive here. So certain brands, yes, we're rolling out in an extended stay, but probably not everywhere in the world because financially they don't work everywhere.
Yeah, okay. I'm very conscious of the time. I've actually got another list of questions, but we're not going to have time. So what I'm going to do is I'm very keen to hear what the audience questions are to put everybody here on much more pressure. So can I ask, do we start with you, Richard?
Yes.
You're not allowed to invest your £100 million in your own sector.
Oh.
So what other sector, out of the three panellists here, would you invest your £100 million into?
Later living.
Sorry?
Later living, without a doubt, I'd go.
We'll look after you, don't worry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're not far off it, so. So you better. Yeah, but I would definitely do that because I mean we are the UK is at the absolute almost at the bottom of the developed world pile in terms of looking after its older citizens in this country. We're way below every other sort of developed country, and we've got I don't know what the numbers are. It's something like 8 or 9 million. You know.
So there was 9.2 million in
Nice.
2019.
Yeah.
In 2021, there were 11 million people over 65.
Yeah, I knew that.
3.3 million in 2021 were lonely. So you are welcome.
Yeah. I've got friends.
Richard, you've got
Few.
They got bingo
You've got to
easy.
do your homework first of all. So, Naveed, where would you spend your money?
I think later living. I'm reaching the stage where it might be useful.
Okay. Oh gosh, right. Let's be swiftly onwards. Jane, where are you spending your money?
Well, I think I'll spend my money on Richard's enterprise because I'll tell you why. Because he can fill
Speak to this panel. I don't know.
No, I want the people to come to us, and then he's going to want their properties to develop their properties
Recycling.
into something else. So no,
Upcycling, yeah.
the reason why is I'm going to bring them to me, and then we'll do a deal.
Nobody voted for hotels.
I know.
Oh, can
I
you?
mean, really, we had
We
this
weren't
prep
allowed to.
call.
We
I
weren't allowed
told
to.
you, vote for hotels.
I'm voting for hotels. So.
Oh, okay, thanks. I got at least
don't get
one
it.
friend here.
I said hybrid hotels, 15% better.
Oh, you're no point in backtracking now. Sorry.
I can't talk. I can't do
That's
it.
me
Yeah.
now. I'm sorry, I don't know you.
Thank you for the 100 million. I'm spending it on housing because I think this country needs it.
Okay, right. We've got about 3 minutes left. I'm very, very keen to hear from the audience for some very, very good and difficult questions.
Thank you. Dev Desai from Watson, Farley and Williams. Jane, I think, Director, to you, one point of clarification. Charles I, he didn't abdicate, he was beheaded.
Yes,
so,
I mean, I didn't. Yes, he was. I didn't say.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
great
right,
selling.
right.
Okay, thank you. All right,
just
I've
for
been told I've.
I think she said he was abdicated.
He was. Yeah,
that's
he
very
was beheaded.
a politician's
Thank
way of
you.
dealing
Well
with it.
done. Well done.
No, but in all
Apologies.
seriousness, just around the business model, you mentioned a 30% deferred management
Yeah.
fee, and that got me interested because if so, I'd put my however many millions into your business, I think. I
How many have you got?
30% of what? So, what's
So
the-
30%. So I really do have to explain that. So it's the sale price. So if someone say buys a property in 2016 for £1 million, and they sold yesterday for 1.7 million, we'll get 30% of the 1.7, and the estate takes the rest.
So 30% of the sale price. That's
Yes.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so
but
then,
can I explain to you, there is
Yeah.
a very strong model that's over an 8-year period. The person that came in 2016
Yeah.
has a service charge, and that is fixed. So we can make a promise to them that when you come to us, you know what you're going to spend for the time that you're going to be with us. We don't RPI link it or anything. They have a fixed rate.
Yeah.
And if you look at the modelling that goes over it, it actually balances out really well. But from a person that's going to look at it whose funds may be capped, if you're
Yeah.
not earning anymore, your assets may be tied up. So you can actually project what your spending can be for the next 10 years.
but that's essentially a 30% depreciation on that asset over
for them.
relatively short period of time.
And
And whatever the estate gets, then they might get inheritance tax another 40%. So,
Come and invest in us.
gosh.
But
But
if you
do
come and
hotels first
invest
of
in
all.
us in New Zealand, we get 100% of the capital gain back in New Zealand.
Can we?
So you will
Just
take
again.
no 100% of the capital gain and 30% of the
Plus
initial cost.
30%.
Yeah,
God, you drive a hard bargain.
And there's no capital gains tax in New Zealand.
no, there's no capital gains tax or inheritance tax.
we-
Okay.
Apologies, I'm just conscious about people with other questions. Anybody get any other questions? No? I'm 6 seconds over. There you go.
We've got minus 10 seconds.
I don't think it's too serious a question. Do you turn down the heat if the prices are really, really high?
Why should we? No, we don't control the price, the sale price. Actually, it's the owner of the property because we lease the properties, so we don't control it. They want the maximum.
Any other questions?
What's the average age of a person buying into your, this is for Jane, of course.
Yeah,
And what's the average length of stay?
they buy in at about 78, 80, somewhere around there. The average age at the moment is about 81. And the average stay is the ones that bought in 2016 in Battersea, which I'm referring to there. They have been there 8, 9 years already, and we've still got the majority there. So it can go up to 10 years, whatever, however long they live. They are getting fragile.
Well, that's my question, obviously. The average length of stay is the remaining
Yes.
lifespan. Yeah.
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 So
So
they,
what is the average length of stay then?
it was 8, 9, 10 years round about there.
Okay, 8, 9.
God, they live a long time. God.
Okay. I'd like to say a very big thank you to each of our panel members, even though I strongly disagree, but you can't have everything in life. I'm just saying extended stay is a sector you should be investing into, one of the highest profit conversions of all the hotel
I'll look after
sectors.
you.
So, but seriously, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for listening. Okay?